When you're working with a realtor, a lot of times you get caught up in talking about price and contract issues, and you talk about, what taxes, what the property taxes are going to be, potentially maybe the insurance, are there HOAs, the basic stuff. But what you really need to think about and put yourself as a buyer, if you're a buyer, or even if you're a seller, you need to put yourself in the buyer's shoes. You know what the asking price of the home is. You can estimate the closing costs through your mortgage person, the taxes and insurance, but how do you really know what the true cost of a home's going to be? So I have a list that I received from the Texas Realtors, which is awesome. Every time, that's a great thing about this business is you can always be learning something. Every single transaction I do, and I've done a lot of them over my time frame of being a broker and a realtor, I learned something every single day. And in fact, I went on a final walkthrough last night and I saw something from a buyer that I'd never seen before on a walkthrough. It took us about 30 minutes when usually sometimes it only takes about 10. But this gentleman was turning on the water to make sure the hot water was running hot. And the cold water too, flushing the toilets, checking the ceilings for leaks, just really doing his final due diligence. He walked around in the backyard. I was so pleased to see that I don't normally see that, because a lot of times since COVID, you really need to do a final walkthrough to make sure there's no water leaks underneath the sink, to make sure the heating and air conditioning system kicks on, which it did. And anything else that you may or may not have negotiated. You need to be aware of that. But aside from all that, the potential expenses that you need to keep in mind really could affect the immediate and the long-term affordability of your home. I've jokingly said, since I've bought our home, that every single day it feels like something breaks. Now today, nothing broke. Amazing. But it's kind of just a joke. And if you're comparing two or more properties, think about this when you're going into it. And these are things that I look at when I walk into a home. I don't get caught up in the furniture and the colors of the walls and all the stuff that can be easily changed, even the hardware on the sinks and stuff. But some of the things that I look for as I am talking to my buyer clients and where they're moving, relocating from, or even if they're just moving across the county or the city or state of Texas or across the country, think about what, number one, would be commuting. What are the fuel costs going to be? What do you think the wear and tear on your vehicle, what are you driving, right, is going to be? And, how many vehicles are you going to need? If the husband and wife works or the two spouses work, are they each going to need a car? Do you have teenage kids that need a car to go to school? There are a lot of toll roads in Texas, especially around here. And you need to be conscious of that, because some of those toll roads run higher or lower depending on the traffic flow. It's crummy, but that's kind of the way they operate. And so you need to think about that in relation to your workplace and, pretty much places that you go regularly, whether it's just going to the store and this applies not just in Flower Mound, but I'm specifically talking about Flower Mound, but everywhere in Texas. But you can use this wherever you live, right? Now, the other thing is, the second thing I would want to touch on would be energy efficiency. What's the size of the home? Can you get up in the attic and kind of look at the insulation? Do you want to do that before? I'm not telling you to do that, but do you want to maybe glance at some of that if you have the opportunity to do it? How many windows are there? Are they the original builder windows? Are you going to have to replace those? Because windows can be, $1,100, $1,200 a piece or more, depending on what you want to buy. And will they influence the way the house is heated and cooled? I still currently own a condo that has the original plate glass windows, but it's a tiny place and it's super well insulated, and replacing those windows, it's just not worth it. the electricity bill is so low to begin with. I mean, you may be able to, if it's possible, depending on the home, you may be able to get like past records of utility bills and kind of get an idea. Some sellers, are willing to disclose that. Some people, it's just going to be personal. I mean, if you like to keep your air conditioning in the summer down at 68 degrees, and your bill is going to be higher than somebody that's currently living there and can live with a 75, 78 degree air conditioning system. So that would be the second thing. The third thing, depending on what stage of life that you're in, if you're a first-time home buyer, if you're somebody that's moving across the country or whatever, what is the move-in readiness of that home? I mean, could you bring your boxes in on day one, or do you need to paint or put new carpet, or are there remodeling things that need attention? Do you need to redo the kitchen, because you may not want to live through all of that. So that would be the third thing I would think about, was what is the move-in readiness of the home? And that's client specific, of course, because everybody's different. HOA. I'm a big advocate for HOAs, not so much in condos, but that's a necessary evil. But here's the deal with HOAs in Texas. I can tell you the neighborhoods and different towns that I've been to where there is an HOA, and across the street there's not an HOA, and I'm telling you, you want the HOA. They're not as restrictive as you think they are, but listen, it keeps everybody accountable. And they're they're all different, especially in what they cost. If you're living in a homeowner association that's in a neighborhood, there may be special assessments that, as large common cost rise. If it's a well-run HOA, they've got a good team that's managing the books and everything. So, it depends on the HOA, right? I'm just kind of touching on that. Obviously, do your own research. Every HOA is different. Every HOA pays for certain things. I have known HOAs where they mow the front of the yard. I know HOAs that don't, and you're paying for the community landscape of the whole development. So I can go down a rabbit hole on that. So let's don't do that. Where are we on? 5? The fifth thing I would look at is the aging systems. I should probably put this as more important. The older the HVA system is, the roof, the septic system, if you have a septic system, the sooner you may need to make repairs or replace it altogether. I will tell you that the insurance industry is just getting tighter and tighter on a lot of things. If your roof is over a certain age, and every insurance company is different, then it would cost you a pretty penny to replace the roof. And if the roof is a situation where maybe the seller hasn't kept up on it, maybe they're older, then and there's been hail, because that's the big deal here is hail. It's going to be tough to get that roof insured. So heads up on that deal. And the HVA system, I saw a Linux system. It's been a couple of years, but this thing was from like the 1970s, and it was still running and cooling that house like nobody's business. I don't know how they were able to keep it running and take care of it that long, but and I'm not giving a shout out to Linux, but I was pretty impressed. But you know what? You got, depending on the seller, and if they've had regular maintenance, and the system's not all gunked up, it should last a while. But you know what? I'm not an air conditioning person, so that would be an extra step that you might want to think about taking to get an assessment on. So we're at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flood insurance. This is a tricky one. If you're if your property is located in a floodplain, which all of this area is, whether it's a 100 or 500 year floodplain, we're all in a floodplain up here. Even if you're not required to do it, you may want to think about it. Now, some people that I've worked with, I have discussed the whole floodplain insurance with, is if you're near a creek, if you're in some low-lying areas, if you are near a lake that could potentially overflow. I mean, it could just be one of those freak things. And it's not that expensive to begin with, but you may want to consider it. So, how much is it a year? I don't remember. I did it for a little while on one of the rental properties, but then decided it wasn't necessary. Another thing is, what is the infrastructure of the house? So now we're on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. What is the infrastructure of the house? Will you need to add things once you move in? Do you have an electric car? Do you have a Tesla? And you got to add a 220 plug. Some of the, are there solar panels? Do you need the solar panels? Do you want the solar panels? That's a whole nother video. And does it have a storage shed? Are you going to have to pay for storage? Because storage is, to me, like a waste of money. Watch one of my other videos. It makes me crazy. The only people that are making money on the storage deals are the storage companies. You're the loser on this, to be honest with you, because you forget about that it's there. And then finally, what is your outdoor upkeep going to be? I mean, all outdoor spaces are characteristically different, right? But this could have a huge impact on your water bill. I mean, I know some people that pay $1,500 a month in the summertime for water bills. I've never seen anything close to that, but it happens. And what are the maintenance costs? I mean, do you have grass? Do you need to put in artificial turf in the backyard to save some money on, number one, water, number two, landscaping? Something to consider. And whether you do the work yourself or if you're going to pay for a service. These are things that a lot of realtors don't talk about because it's a buzzkill and they want to sell a house. I'm telling you this as a broker because the more educated you are going into a situation, the better off you're going to be and have less surprises. And that's my job. And I'm Chris Hooper Realty. I look forward to talking to you again.